Hey, and welcome to another episode of the N8N Spotlight. It's been some time, so we have a few topics to cover. As always, Bram, would you like to start with the product updates?
Yes, of course. So the code node got some updates. We now have some nice colors and stuff like that, and there's also some extra functionality in it. Apparently, they are using VS Code as the basis because, of course, you don't want to relearn keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that. There's also the task runner, which is now enabled by default. And the task runner is that NA has a separate process started for the code that you're running, making it faster and more stable, which is always a nice thing to have. And now it's the default option because there was some testing involved still, and now it is completely released. And as you can see, I can also drag around again because the control left click is now also fixed on the new canvas, which is nice as the new canvas is now the default. The wait node got some changes now as well with the sub-workflow execution. It now actually does wait for the subflows inside the parent workflow, so you don't have to deal with issues with that anymore. The set node has a long requested feature added to it again, which is the dragging of the fields, which is quite nice. It's not really that useful data structure wise because the JSON doesn't care, but it is nice to have. And also in the overview, you can now create the workflow easily again. They changed this and now they changed it back, sort of. Because now you have the extra options under an extra context kind of menu. The one thing though, if you go to the credentials, it still says create workflow on top instead of having the create credentials there then, because that would be more useful, of course, if you're in the credentials view. The sub workflows got another nice addition. I used to have a community node called the logger to make sure to use only one sub workflow as the logging workflow, and then you add some extra information. But now you can do that with the default node. So you can say in the trigger which fields you're expecting. In this case, I put some simple fields in there like the workflow ID, the execution ID, and the data. And then in the execute workflow node, you can actually set that data. So when you run this in the sub workflow, you will get the actual data coming in, which is quite nice and is always helpful inside loops and stuff like that. So for the form nodes, we got some nice additions where you can use some HTML. Not all the fields support it, but some of them do. So for example, the description, you can put some HTML in there. The question mark, if you hover over that, it will show you if it does accept HTML. So you can easily tell which field does and which field doesn't. For the form elements, so for the actual fields inside the form, you can also put a custom HTML block in there. It is read-only, but you can still use this to add some stuff to your form, which is quite nice. And then, of course, in the next form, you also have that form description. And in the end form, we don't really have any HTML in there. But of course, we hope that in the future updates, we get some more fields where we can put HTML in. And then, of course, make way nicer forms, which we can actually style, which is not possible at this moment. Mario, what do you have?
So, previously, when you were retrieving documents from a vector store, you needed some setup like a question and answer chain, and then a vector store retriever, and then you could add the in memory vector store to that. And to use this in an AI agent, you needed to implement a n8n workflow tool, which would then call a sub workflow, and that was quite complex. But now you have the option to connect this vector store directly to the AI agent. So first you need to switch the option to S2 for AI agent. Then you give it a name, and some description so the AI knows what to do. And then you can connect this directly to the tools agent. Other than that, projects now have icons, so you can distinguish them even easier. You can set them here in the project settings. And that also makes them appear way better in the collapsed sidebar. Like before, there were just two letters, and now you have the icons. With that, also the sidebar now stays collapsed even if you reload the page. And one more thing to say is that the whole web application now has better support on mobile devices. We quite wish that it will get better over time because still, if you open like nodes, the layout is not perfect. But one thing which is definitely noticeable that when you scroll through workflow templates on mobile devices, that you can actually zoom in into workflows and stuff like that. AI agents have now two new models, which is DeepSeek, which is very popular right now, and also OpenRouter, which gives a lot of possibilities because you have a variety of LLMs available here. So talking about Gemini, OpenAI, Anthropic, you name it. Maybe remember from episode number 2 that there we introduced a feature which is send and wait for response, which looks something like this. So this would interrupt the workflow until someone in the email approves, or there's also an option to deny a request. And that feature was available for Gmail and Slack, and now also Outlook, Telegram, and even Send Email, so meaning SMTP supports that, which offers universal use. Now let me show a couple of tips, starting with form submissions. If you ever wanted to add like a checkbox to agree to terms and conditions, that is quite difficult because there is no actual checkbox property available. But there is a hack, which is if you use a drop-down list, then activate the multiple choice option. You can also say it's a required field. Add just one option, which is something like agree to the terms. And in the field label, you just add a space so it doesn't show up at all. Then it looks somewhat like this. And there you have the option which is required, and the user has to check this, otherwise the form cannot be submitted. Now another one, if you want to generate some sample data for your workflows, you can use the debug helper, and with the option generate random data, you can choose from a variety of options here. And if I test the step, you see it generates some sample data which you can use. One more thing, if you have huge workflows, you might want to use the no operation node to organize your streams. So the lines do not collide with other nodes. You can arrange them in a different way. Another thing to consider is to use the no operation node as a reference point, because in this setup, you can use this node to reference within the nodes after that. And no matter what changes before this node, it doesn't affect the other nodes, so you don't have to correct it manually. Today, we are not going to show any community builds. Instead, I want to introduce an overview page, which can help you find community nodes even easier, which is this one. You can reach it at nancommunitynodes.octaonic.com. Link is down in the description. You can search by package name, description, and publisher, and also sort in different ways. With that, let's finish up for today. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and see you next time.